Oh, hello there, Travis. What are we actually seeing starts to get complicated? It was easy. It will start to separate. They're definitely not behind that restricted access door. They're not. Forget about it.
None of them will be able to be revived.
So please, be reasonable. Returning to the orientation we usually the private traditional. A stabby, but I don't think. And those rectangular outcroppings weren't. Here is my Catwoman glove and glove. I should have a floating, impossible anti-gravity blah blah blah. Now, if we were to take it, snapshots, eventually, how do you transmit a discrete shells?
Well, Aria, we've been tracking this thing for weeks and we still don't know what it is.
The basilisk has its eyes on you. What are you going to do? Then at some point, the acceleration is going to get so high that you're going to pass 9.8 meters. Look, I know that neither of those examples were fun. A screaming fish on this side would never be fun, leaving me weightless no matter where I am. What the? We generate our heat endogenously or within our own bodies. I give killer high fives. Is it? That it? This story is only one of a dozen. Okay, good, because it's rock, paper, scissors. Where are you right now? Bam. The fingerling. That fingerling. Isn't that wild? Fingerling.
Mr. Coffee. Oh, I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
Man, will you look at it down there, Aria? It is beautiful, but there sure is a lot of crap. No, I mean, not just like, you know, that, but yeah, just look at all the buildings, all the dang concrete, all the infrastructure. Where's all the animals? Where's all the stuff? The greenery. I think we should. Oh, I think they need to know about this. I think this particular civilization has crossed a frightening tipping point in terms of its junk. We should get down there and tell them just how much of it is in their trunk. Welcome to office hours. Man, that spaceship lands fast, huh? Hello, and welcome to Office Hours, a live component of the facility where good old Professor Kyle opens up his blast doors, as you just saw, welcoming all my staff, all my professors, my research assistants, and assorted geekery. I'm allowing you to come into the office for an hour or so, ask any old sciencey or pop culture-y question that you may be wondering, and we'll be going through, as we are wont to do, a number of topics selected by yours truly throughout the week. We'll be talking about junk in Earth's trunk. We're going to be talking about murders, but nothing graphic. We'll also be talking about sandcastles, taking one of your comments from the latest episode of The Facility, and we'll be talking about lazy beams, because everyone likes lazy beams. But before that, if you want to join the facility, if you want to continue on this conversation and get special perks, join our Discord, etc., etc., my security team, who's in the chat right now, will be posting a link to patreon.com/KyleHill, and if you support us just enough, you get so many little bimbops and bonuses. Yeah, I made it up off the top of my head. What do you want? My PR guy doesn't like when I do that. So if you want to join, you can do that. Or if you want to have your comment even more seen and support all of us at the facility, you can try Super Chat on YouTube in the YouTube chat. And as you can see, they're already rolling in. Those are all those fancy comments there. And remember, this month, all Super Chats are going towards the Grant Imahara Steam Foundation. Now, I would have added that as the official fundraiser for this YouTube video, but since they are still applying for their nonprofit status, as they were created not too long ago, unfortunately, the facility, myself, the administrator, will be cutting a check at the end of the year, and that will be our little present to young nerds of all kinds. So we'll be doing that. And as you can see, there's many examples of it. Elizabeth Calvert, always at the top of the show with the 50, who says, get to catch the live stream. I had to take today off for mom's surgery. Lymph nodes tested negative for cancer. That's great. Also, Tiny Human is watching and says hi. Well, hello, Tiny Human. I'm very happy to hear about your grandma and your ma. Elizabeth. Sounds like everything is going well. We also have one of my original supporters, Heather Selset, with the 50 says, in thankful memory of Grant, simping for science. Yes, of course. Kaylee Reeds with the 20 says, there are consequences to capitalize, and junk is one of them, but I wouldn't want to become a communist just to improve the situation. Okay. Not quite sure where that's coming from. Maybe that's on you. Elizabeth with another 5s. Are you going to discuss the super planet event with Joop Joop and Saturn? Segway, Mamie. They're just going to... It's a temporary alignment from our point of view where the planets are going to get so close in the sky, it looks like they're almost overlapping to create a super planet. But there's not going to be any super planet in Practica. And also, we have Mixmaster with a 10. It says, Kyle Senpai, thanks for noticing me last week. How has Cyberpunk been for you? Enjoying it so far? Have you managed to at least get it running? So, here's the thing about Cyberpunk. Right now, what you're seeing on the screen looks better than Cyberpunk 27 on the PS4 or Xbox One. I think if it does have the possibility to be an amazing game and a cool story, and I love Cyberpunk stories, but if the story is cool and I haven't gotten that far into it, I have now refused to continue playing it on the PS4 because I feel like I'm getting a bad impression of a possibly very good game because the graphics are 720p. We're running like 20 frames per second. I'm crashing 9 out of 10 times I play. It's atrocious on last gen. And we should be angry about that. You know, keeping reviewers from reviewing console copies, not allowing footage to be taken from reviews about bugs. That's bad. And they need to do a lot to get me back in their camp, especially after something like The Witcher 3, which they supported so much. Excuse me. So let's move on to our very first topic before we get too much further, because I see a lot of you watching, waiting, talking about junk. Let's check our trunk. So, a lot of people ask the question, when did the human era start? I love the name, the proposed name for the human era. And that was the Anthropocene, or Anthropocene, if you want to sound like a real Neanderthal. But the Anthropocene is the proposed era of geologic time where humanity had made enough of a mark such that you could define a new era. A lot of people suggested different signifiers of the Anthropocene. One was once we're able to detect all the radioactivity, the radionuclides from atmospheric nuclear testing in all materials from old wine to old portraits and stuff like that, old paint in the paintings. Once we're able to detect that, it's a decent argument to say that humans have made an enormous impact on the world. Another proposed point was the laying down of a layer of plastic. So all around the world, if you were to go and start digging, let's say humans 1,000 years from now, if they started digging far back enough, they would start to find the first implementation of plastic worldwide. And because plastic doesn't biodegrade or degrade much at all, that would be a way to say, okay, well, this is when humanity really started having a big impact on the planet. And today's topic is proposing, I don't know if the study's proposing this, but I'm proposing this, that now we're at another tipping point. And this tipping point is when human-made stuff now exceeds the mass of every living thing on the planet. And I'm not just talking about animals, which are outnumbered by flora and viruses and bacteria. Everything that could be considered alive or kind of alive in virus's case. So now, human-made stuff exceeds that weight. And of course, since we're looking at a study, we can get even more granular than that. So you're looking at a graphic from this study, human-made mass versus living biomass for the last 100 years, and then pushing out another 5 years just to extrapolate. And obviously, you can see, starting in the Industrial Revolution, not much human-made mass at all until it, around 1990, explodes in mass. You can see the blue section, plastic, metals, bricks, asphalt, aggregates like gravel. Concrete is by far the largest. And this black line you're seeing here is biomass. And as any good science paper would do, they have a large range for, there's a lot of different estimates, and there's also different ways to categorize biomass. You can consider wet biomass, which includes water content and sounds gross, or you could go dry biomass, so-called dry biomass, and that's only including more or less just the carbon. But that equals out to about this black line. And now, or depending on your projections and your actual estimates here, either this year or in the next 3 years or so, all human-made stuff weighs more than all living stuff. And to put that into context, you can break down the numbers even further from the study's authors, as they say. Think about this for a second. The world's plastics, just the world's plastics, now weigh as much as all the animals. Think about that. Every fish in the sea, every cricket on land, and there's a lot of crickets. Everything is equal to how much plastic we've polluted the planet with. And I like alliteration. It's not all pollution. Plastic does a lot of fantastic things. But in the last 100 years, animals have gone from the defining characteristic of the planet, that it has life, to almost superseded by a synthetic material on that planet. Sorry, I was caught up in reading the numbers. The wet weight of biomass on Earth is estimated to be 2.2 trillion metric tons, and we are on track to completely pass that point, depending on where your estimates vary. And if you take a more expansive view of anthropogenic or human-made mass into account, like accounting for waste and stuff like that, we could have outweighed all of biomass in 1977. So I bring all this up to point out that this could be another real marker of the Anthropocene. This could be the point at which humanity has had such an effect on the planet that what makes the planet so fantastic is less of a percentage of it. And I want to bring it up because it's perspective warping, right? Just think of nature. Just think of the enormity of Earth's biosphere. We're talking about like every blade of grass, all the whales, all the insects, all the spiders, all the ants. There's a lot of ants. Everything. And there's almost more concrete than all of it. So obviously, to continue, we can't continue on at a rate such as this. We've already lost half of species. Things are getting more and more dire every decade, and so we need to figure out a way to live in concordance with life and not completely squash it, trample it under the foot of industry and progress because, you know, once Earth looks like Coruscant and the biosphere collapses, that's going to be it. Mr. Diglett with the 20 says, sorry, I missed last meeting. I got lost in the labyrinth again. Nah, it's fine. I get lost in there too. David Neptune with the 25 says, for Grant, thank you so much. Random good game with the Australian $69. Hashtag simp for Grant. That is all. Thank you. We have Alyssa Rhonda, who's happy to catch the stream, with the 50, who says, listen, I love Wall-E. It's a great movie. Makes me cry. I'd prefer not to live it, though. Just a thought. Yeah, me either. Chris Eastman with the 20 says, keep being awesome. This is for Grant. Thank you. Red Rum, or Murder with the 20 says, hey, Kyle, what are you and Aria doing for the holidays at the facility? Merry Christmas. Aria and I will be doing nothing. We're not traveling, of course. It's nice to see family, but it's also nice to keep people alive. I'd argue that it's nicer. So we're not doing anything. I might buy all of the cats individualized presents that they have to rip into if they want them. But that sounds crazy. VCDRNY says, with the 20, says, Kyle, love the show. Last week I spent my birthday with me, myself, and I because of COVID. How excited are you for The Expanse? What? You mean the best sci-fi show since Star Trek The Next Generation? Yeah. And on this week at the facility, you can expect an Expanse-themed episode complete with fully rendered... not fully rendered. I might have a new spaceship arriving at the facility very soon, which you get to see. Thomas Hadrick with a $100 donation says, the Google monster tells me that scientists have discovered via new map data that our tiny star is closer to Sagittarius A and moving much faster than previous estimates. Your thoughts? Also, last dab Apollo hot sauce. Would you? Oh, I hate spicy food. So probably not. But it would make for good content. So, you know, what is my life if not content? So maybe. In regards to Sagittarius, space is so big and our lives are so short that most of these cosmic calamities that are projected to happen, it's not going to matter to me or you. Unless a gamma ray burst hits us out of nowhere and fries everything. Jesus Skywalker. Should be Jesus Waterwalker, dude. Haven't you even read King James? I don't mean to be weird about that. I just went to a lot of Catholic school. Jesus Skywalker with the Australian $50 says, hey, Kyle, has a redistribution of materials across the planet affected Earth's gravity in a measurable way? No. What did they say it was? Okay, so let's do a little order of magnitude. We're going to do this off the top of our head. What do they say the wet mass was? It was 2.2 trillion metric tons. A metric ton is 1,000 kilograms. A trillion is 10 to the 12th. So we're talking about 10 to the 15, give or take, kilograms. So 10 to the 15 kilograms is all life on the planet. And if we multiply that by 2, that would be all the human stuff if they're about equal right now. So we have 2 times 10 to the 15th. The planet Earth weighs about 6 times 10 to the 24. So 24 minus 15 is 9. And, jeez. Why are you making me do this, Lab? Okay, so, but roughly speaking, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, of course. So we have the Earth outweighs everything on the surface of Earth, whether human-made or biological, by 3 billion times. 3 times 10 to the 9 is 3 billion. Look at us. We're doing math. It outweighs it by 3 billion times. So to have a real impact on the planet, you'd have to, let's say we redistribute 1% of Earth's mass. That is a lot. That's many hundreds of thousands times more than all the life and all the stuff we put on the planet. So you'd have to do a lot more because Earth is so massive. We are everything that humanity has done, all the life on Earth, everything, even all the oceans and all that, all the forests, that's just like the grape skin on the grape that is Earth. Earth is so much more than the smear of biota on its surface. It's mostly just rock. Pinfari with a 10 says, hey, stop it. Hey, show the show. Since it sounds like we are going back to, since we are on our way to becoming Ravnica, which guild are you joining? Obviously, Simic. That's one of the guilds, right? Oh, I was thinking of Shards. Yeah, I'd go Simic. Selbach, just one of my professors. Selbach with the 10, and no message because they're classy. Liam Ferlay with the Australian $20 says, has this problem quickened greatly with deforestation? I'm sure it's part of the problem, but we're turning, well, that's like zero sum, where you take wood, and which is biological, and you incorporate it in human-made stuff. So you're just taking, well, no, yeah, you're right. Yes, it would make it. What was I thinking of? I don't know. Anyway, and conversely, when you're talking about concrete, you're taking like sand and another granular media, and that is adding to our mass, and it's not taking away from biology at all. So there's two different ways to look at it. And we're making so much concrete and stuff that the Earth is running out of sand. Isn't that weird? Oh, man, humans suck. Dylan with the $9.99 says, just watched Chernobyl last week and remembered you had written about the elephant's foot. Just wondering if you had watched it and how close was it to actual events. Oh, the show was fantastic. And you mentioned the elephant's foot. If you watched one of my most recent episodes at the facility, called The True Story of the Demon Core, that video in a new format, new documentary style format, I highly recommend you watch it because it's something new that we tried. It's my most successful video ever. And I will be continuing the what I call the Half-Life histories moving forward. So we'll continue to do mini documentaries in that format, looking into nuclear accidents and disasters specifically. And you mentioned the elephant's foot, and man, that would be a great topic for maybe the next mini documentary that I already shot. Kamefer with the 5, and let's pause the super chat so we can get to our next Topeka, Kansas. With the 5 says, Kyle the Kyle. I like that one the best because it has my name. Simping for Grant. Also, DS9 was better than TNG in my opinion. Well, that's just your opinion about the fact that you're wrong. Transition. Zodiac. So usually I wouldn't bring up something like this, but it has to do with cryptography and code breaking, which is interesting in and of itself, but I wanted to link it back to something, another famous code breaking thing. So Zodiac was a serial killer, and he was responsible for the responsible for the deaths of at least 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 60s and 70s, and he was so confident in his methods that he, and well, I mean it could be a she, but just statistically probably a he would send letters to the police saying, if you, more or less, if you, in, you know, different different newspapers, and he said, if you can figure out this code, it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you, you know, look, I shot a man sitting in a parked car right here. It tells you where I set a bomb. It tells you my name. By the way, my name is, it says right there, by the way, my name is. So you need to figure out this code, this cipher, a code you apply to some coded message to read it back in the proper letters. And this obviously, because it was so since it was linked to a serial killer, and because the killings were horrible and grisly, this became something of a pop culture phenomenon. And because this was like unbreakable, it had this sort of allure to it that was very interesting. But as of last week, the code was broken. The 340 cipher, as it was known. A doctor and 2 other cryptologists and a supercomputer named Spartan in Melbourne, Australia, eventually revealed its content. And its content, as you can assume from someone obviously malicious, sadistic, and has a lot of issues, had a lot of stuff like this. You know, I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber. I'm not afraid of death. Ghastly stuff. Again, why, Kyle, why are you bringing this up? Because how they actually crack this, and keep in mind, they went through 650,000 different interpretations of this code to show you how good this code was. To crack this, they got a clue, a hint that they haven't found in, 20, 30 years or whatever. And they had to use a supercomputer. What was that hint? Well, as they were applying different interpretations of the code, again, over 600,000, in the noise of output that returns, say, if you don't have the correct cipher, just gibberish is going to come out. But in one of these outputs of gibberish, they saw the term gas chamber. And the researchers thought, well, it's incredibly unlikely that a random string of words or a random sentence would have such a distinct and distinctly kind of terrible phrase in it. And so they used the part of the cipher that gave this output gas chamber, and they reverse engineered, working from, okay, well, let's assume that this cipher, when applied to this section, gives gas chamber. Now, applying the same cipher to the rest of it, they were able to finally reverse engineer and get the rest of the code, at least for this section of the code. Again, why is this interesting? Because this is the exact same way that Alan Turing and the rest of the code breakers during World War II broke Nazi codes. The way that they, a huge part of winning the war, deciphering, troop movements and plans and strategy from the Axis powers, they did the same thing. Because the code was so complex in both the killers' example and the Germans during World War II, the code was so complex you could not do this by hand, and you could not just brute force it. It would take millions of years to brute force it. So they needed some way in. In this case, it was recognizing this one phrase. In the case of Alan Turing and Nazi code, they made a mistake too. They put repeated phrases in their messages. Stuff like Hail Hitler, for example. And once people, or Turing and his code breakers, once they started noticing that something like that was at the end consistently of messages, they can start taking shots. Okay, well, what would be this tiny section of code with this amount, with this number of letters, and it would be at the end of German correspondence. They start trying code that would give that output, and then they can reverse engineer back and break everything, and then save probably millions of lives, which they did. And that was fascinating. But so it's very cool to me to see the same sort of cryptography at play here to crack what is arguably the most famous code in recent history. So I thought that was very cool. And now you know how they did it. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. Where is chat? Wyvern Morgan. What a cool name that is. You sound like a a detective for a fantasy world's detective. Wyvern Morgan, private with swords, says, and they usually didn't change their code key like it was advised. Yeah. So, and yes, we are talking about the Enigma code and the Enigma machine if you want to know more about it. David Jones says the Allies also started planting fake messages that would be reported to Berlin. Yes, there was a lot of, well, that's just common. There's a lot of false information that gets thrown about on every sides of a conflict too, as part of information warfare. Like with, like how Russia's doing to us right now. Scott Leckenby says, hey Kyle, just curious, but are you planning on doing more episodes based around The Expanse with the new season coming out in a few days? Thanks for taking the time to read my question. Yes, in fact, this Friday on YouTube, we have a new episode centered around The Expanse and the new season, but there's no spoilers in it. And it's going to be cool because I bought a spaceship. A red one. Vanilla Gorilla Austin Kane. Wow, I said that in one go. I want more creepy topics for the videos like this. The nuclear bomb, maybe some forensics, how they caught heinous criminals. Well, like I said, we will be doing another mini documentary about arguably the most famous result of a nuclear disaster, and that's going to be in the next couple weeks. I also, I don't want to give it away, but I did something where I almost died, and that was fun. It was safe-ish. There's safety people there. It was fine. So look forward to that. Shalene says, what was Zodiac's name? I don't know. I didn't break the code. I'm not a supercomputer named Spartan. Although I could be. Hey, Kyle, fan of the show. Dr. Gibber says, hey, Kyle, fan of the show, even before you discovered argan oil. Sad times. I know. Anything, like, before 2017 and before, I look terrible. And you and a few others inspired me to make my own channel where I deliver space news as Soviet Elvis Presley. Will you rate it? Well, Soviet Elvis Presley reads space news. Well, I mean, I can't say I'm not intrigued. Thank you very much, comrade. Chop a man in half. Am I close? Yeah. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. It's weird. Sorry if I'm blowing up your spot a little bit. Josh Ash says, hey Kyle, what are your thoughts on Nerf and other foam dart blasters? Well, obviously, they're awesome. Well, they were more awesome when they weren't, like weapons of war like they are today. And once you hit a kid directly in the eyeball enough times, it gets less fun. Because they start crying, then you start crying, and then they tell their mom, and then you can't play over there anymore, even though he kind of sucked, you know. Thomas Hadrick says, your episode was safe-ish. Kyle adds high standards. Well, everything that I do is a lot safer than what, like, Backyard Scientist does, or Alan Pan does, or Krabs in Science does. Those guys don't do what they do. It's bad. Look, that's what I'll say. Like, I'm not calling anyone out, but like having worked with the old Mythbusters crew, the level, they take safety so seriously. It's quite impressive. You know, my producer there, you know, he said it. You know, people would be saying, "Well, we're just firing like a potato gun at low pressure. It's fine." And he's like, "Look, I know you think you know what you're doing. But if something goes wrong, it's my butt and not yours. So I'm going to take this seriously, even if you don't." I mean, just like firing like a piston, just air out of a piston. No even projectile or anything like that. We had the crew leave the building. Like, everyone outside, quick fire remotely. All right, everyone back inside. They take safety very, very seriously, and so do I. Even like a small charge, we'd be like a mile away, you know. Merlin says, oh, humble brag. Yeah. Wouldn't you? We have Tam with the 50. He says, hashtag Sim for Science. Thank you so much, Tam, and thank you for being a member of the facility, where you get so many benefits. Oh, man. And let's... Yeah, we're fine. Oh. Well, sorry, Joshua John, my security team didn't like what you had to say, but I like listening to jazz. Oh, I discovered a new jazz drummer yesterday, or 2 days ago. His name is Yusef Days. Yusef, Dayes. And he's a machine. He's really good. There's only a few videos on his channel, but the latest, I think, is an hour-long live album. If you like new kind of acidy jazz, he's fantastic. I recommend it. Brett Hake, or Hawk, says, hey Kyle, would love to hear your thoughts on the arguments that neurodivergent afflictions are based on evolution. For example, ADHD would be great if you were a hunter-gatherer. Well, first of all, let's be clear. Being neurodivergent is not an affliction. It's not a disease. It's a brain type. You hear about things on the spectrum, but what you need to internalize is that the spectrum contains everything, you know. So on it, you know, if we had one end of the scale that was, you know, non-functioning autistic, and the other end of the scale was completely extroverted, for example, then everything in between, there's no the gradations. There's no bad or good here. It's just varying hues of how your brain views things. And so let's not call them afflictions, because they're not. And we know that neurotypical, neurodivergent, neurodiverse, there isn't one big monolithic group of normal people. So it's not an affliction. It's a state. It's a brain state. The problem with evolutionary psychology at its base is that even though there's a lot of cool arguments and there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of ideas that make a lot of sense, there's no way to test those theories at all. So it's very hard to make good evolutionary psychology-based arguments. So to say having ADHD might make you, a better hunter-gatherer, maybe, but you can also imagine a lot of downsides, and there's no way to test this, that hypothesis specifically. So I can't really comment on it. But, you know, and neurodiversity comes along with a lot of different traits that just may or may not be valued by society, and that's why we stigmatize them or don't. You know, for example, we don't stigmatize extreme, we stigmatize extreme introversion, but we don't stigmatize extreme extroversion, where if society or human beings were slightly different, you could see people thinking, you know, needing attention all the time, wanting to go out all the time, being happy and bubbly and talkative all the time. In another society, they might deem that as divergent and an affliction. But we don't. We just have the society and the psychology that we do. So, yeah. Embrace neurodiversity. There's a lot of things to learn from each other. Dr. Strange Jove, one of my Professor Emerituses, great supporter of the facility, with the $100 donation to the Grant Steam Foundation, Grant Imahara Steam Foundation. Hashtag Simp for Steam, looking forward to more tales of nuclear whoopsies. Well, you know, they don't sound as cool when you call them that. But, you know, I'll take it. Matt Creel with the 10 says, since cloning probably wouldn't work, could we potentially create something like dinosaurs in size and appearance through selective breeding of certain birds? I'll do you one better. What the scientist, and his name is escaping me, and it shouldn't. Is it Jack Horner? It's Jack Horner. The scientist, Jack Horner, he is who the character in Jurassic Park, the scientist in Jurassic Park, is based on. And what he's trying to do, since we know that there's an evolutionary lineage from dinosaurs to birds, what he was trying to do is go back into birds' genes and flip different switches so that they can... all that evolutionary history is there. It's coded into the DNA. What he was trying to do was flip certain genetic switches so it would suppress, kind of in reverse, it would suppress the bird-like genes and re-express the more dinosaurian genes. And I think he's made a chicken embryo with teeth. He calls it Chickenosaurus. And I interviewed him once, and I said, what does he really want? And he's like, I want a fluffy pink Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I support that. And cloning won't work, as you say, because DNA, like radioactive material, has a half-life. It will degrade over time, and the furthest you could go back and pull DNA out of say a mosquito or an ancient mosquito, it's only a few 100,000 years, and obviously dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, so there's no real hope of getting intact or intact enough DNA. And then you would have to find an animal that could birth this thing. Maybe a bird could do it, but the physiology could be so different now, it might not be possible. That's why it's much more possible for something like a woolly mammoth, because only 10,000 years ago, and it could still probably be birthed by something like a modern elephant. Elizabeth with the 10 says, thank you, Kyle. I have ADHD, and good chance my tiny human does too. Also want to explain a potato gun to him. Oh, also, do you want to explain a potato gun to him? Okay, hello, tiny human. I believe your mom said your name was Alex. A potato gun is basically just a pipe, and you shove a potato on one end, and on the other end, you have some sort of gas that if you put a lighter next to it, the gas goes, it burns. What this burning does, it creates a lot of pressure in the back of the tube, and so when you put the potato in, the pressure wants to go everywhere, but the tube is really strong. But do you know what's not strong? Potatoes. And so the potato gets pushed out of the other end of the tube, and it goes flying, goes funk. Kind of like that. Kind of like that sound that grenade launchers make in GoldenEye 64. Yeah, that's specific of a reference. Let's pause the super chats for a second so we can get on to our last two topics. Ryan Cohen with the 10 says, my first sim for science, happy to give such a great cause. I just got accepted into college for aerospace engineering, so thanks for inspiring so many nerds. Also, great shirt. Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad you got into the college and field of your choosing. Aerospace engineering is fascinating and awesome. Also, if you want my shirt, this is a printed version of a real map of the moon, front and back. It's not the dark side back there, but it's printed of a map of the moon surface, and I got it in Vsauce's latest Curiosity box, the only box service that I think is probably worth it. So if you want to support other science creators, Vsauce and their Curiosity box is quite good and very high quality. So with that, let's get on to peer review. Oh, what's that down there? There we go. Peer review. So as I like to do on every episode of Office Hours, I like to take one of your comments, questions, suggestions, corrections from the latest episode of the facility and then highlight it because it made me think, or it made me go, huh, or it made me go, ugh. And then I give you an honorary plaque, and after that, you DM me, and you get entrance to the facility for a month. None of you have done that yet, but at least you get a plaque, am I right? So this week, we are looking into Phantom Savage, and Phantom Savage was commenting on the latest episode of the facility, which was Cyberpunk Mantis Blades, that I did with my Razor Girl Thea and Aria's Loner Body, which is jacked AF, as so many of you commented. Look, I know. That's why I don't like to make her mad. She scares me. Anyway, it's from the Cyberpunk video. And looking at how the Mantis Blades performed, Phantom Savage says, now imagine if this was your actual arm, so you weren't worried about the additional weight of stronger materials, and the stabbing, swinging motion was assisted by internal pistons, exerting an equivalent force of power as to what human-sized mantis shrimp would be, and then you got the real deal. A human-sized mantis shrimp would be terrifying. And I brought this up. I like the mantis blades being a example of biomimicry for mantis shrimp, the one with spears, much more so than praying mantis, because praying mantis don't slash or stab, they just grab, hold, and then eat your face while you're still alive. Whereas the mantis spearing shrimp, the Squilla mantis shrimp, they definitely pierce. Not so much slash, but they definitely pierce. And how they do that, it makes a lot of sense. They have this really cool biology where they can lock up their arm, sort of like the way that you would, if you had a rubber band and then you pulled that rubber band around a surface. So you're putting in elastic potential energy, it's called, into the system. And so they build up this elastic potential energy in their body, and then they can lock it with their physiology. They can lock it in place such that they're just a walking, cool-eyed example of elastic potential energy. So they're just walking around with all this potential energy. It's like they're holding a gun, in the same way that gunpowder, a bullet, has a lot of chemical potential energy in reserve. So they're walking around with this elastic potential energy in reserve, and then when they find something they want to hit, so that seems much more cyberpunk-ian to me, where you could have some potential energy and you could release it as mechanical energy to pierce into some chumba or something like that. Look, I just wish I could play the game without it looking like dump. Oh, I've never used that as an adjective before. Who cares? For making me say that word and think about giant mantis people. Phantom Savage, you are now an honorary member of the facility, and now Kevin is going to bring you your plaque. Fantastic. What? Come on! I know they're wearing headphones. I don't care if it spikes. Just a second, Phantom. I gotta go deal with something. I'll be right back. Yeah, you thought I was going to improvise something under that. Nope. Just showing off some cool Demon Core art. By the way, I don't even praise the Basilisk anymore. I just praise the demon. I'm not a demon. Laser beams. Laser beams are cool, and that's maybe one of the dumbest things I've ever said. But laser beams are cool because of how they can provide some advantage in quantum computers. So a quantum computer takes advantage of a certain property of quantum mechanics, and that's more or less superposition. So superposition is the quantum property that allows a quantum system to occupy more than one state at the same time. So if you want to think of that as like a binary example, a quantum system, sorry, there's cat hair everywhere. A quantum system in binary can occupy a 1-0 at the same time. And so this would be no longer just be a bit, this would be a quantum bit or a qubit, which you may have heard of. So quantum computers use qubits. And the great advantage of this is that sorry, I just had a big swig of carbonated stuff. The big advantage of this is that when every single bit in your computer can occupy every state at the exact same time until you collapse the entanglement, this allows you to make calculations faster and more complicated than any supercomputer on the planet. Like a decent quantum computer could crack any code in moments, because what would take a classical computer millions of years to do, it can do many of these calculations all on top of each other at the same time. So quantum computing is amazing. But how do you get all these entanglements to happen? What do you actually use in a quantum computer? You could use, particles, you could use electrons, but in this new research, they're using laser beams. And laser beams, obviously, are made up of photons of light. And what's really good about photons of light is that they move at the speed of light. So if you could harness something like this in a quantum computer, photons, using photons and their detection as how your system processes information, then you can get something that does, then you can get a quantum computer that's really, really, really fast. So in this new research, what scientists did is make a tiny little computer chip with many different beam splitters. And they used beam splitters plus light that was so faint, you're only shooting like single photons of light. Now, what a beam splitter does, it's partially reflective. It's half reflective. So when a beam of light hits it, it can go, it can either come back or it can go through. And if you orient these in certain ways, you can get the reliable or almost reliable differences on where the photons go next. And you can imagine, simple programming language says, well, if a photon is detected here or detected here, then it's going to be a 1 or a 0 or however you want to code it. So I'm not going to act like I totally understand this. But what the research, because I don't, what the researchers did is make 50 of these kind of little logic gate-y beam splitter things on a tiny computer chip, and they sent photons through 50 inputs of these 50 beam splitters, and then they read the output from the chip, what the photons actually did through the beam splitters. Now, this doesn't actually calculate or really solve anything, but once you get the output that can be read, you can create kind of a realm of possibilities where, these outputs look like these outputs if we put light in here or blah, 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 blah. Anyway, it gets really, really complicated, but what's interesting about it is, and now reading from the researchers, I say the researchers had 50 inputs, but had the equivalent of 300 beam splitters on this chip, which gives the total number of possible output states on the chip as 10 to the 30, which is a million trillion different possible outputs. So what's really interesting about this is that the photons of light get entangled with each other as they're reflecting or not reflecting off of these beam splitters because they're just single photons here. And think of how long it would take an ordinary computer to get some output from a possible million trillion different states. Well, what the researchers got using photons of light entangled with each other in a quantum computer chip, in less than 4 minutes, they obtained results. Okay. They sent light through 50 inputs, 300 beam splitters. 4 minutes later, they had some output. Okay, that's pretty good. How long would it take a classical computer to do that? 2.5 billion years! So as you can see, 4 minutes versus 2.5 billion years, you can see anything twice as complicated as this. A quantum computer could calculate something in, 8 minutes, and then your computer you're watching me on right now, it wouldn't give you an output before the sun destroyed the Earth. So you can see the obvious advantage of a quantum system. Now, I should point out that this isn't really, like I said before, it's not really solving a problem. This is just reading an output. It's not calculating anything. It's not running Doom on a calculator or anything like that. But it is showing that using photons instead of other particles in this way could be a huge step towards implementing really, really amazing technology. Let's see what the chat has to say. Just last few minutes. Jack Levy with the 20 says, finally caught you live. Grant was an inspiration. Happy to support the organization. Yes. My question, is the process of animal domestication an example of Stockholm Syndrome? And if so, what's that say about animal consciousness? Well, I think that's really complicated in that you're ascribing a quirk of human psychology to animals, which I don't think is warranted. I think what makes more sense, the domestication of animals, let's take a dog. It's probably they're not getting used to their captor, and they're not being like, well, I guess so. I mean, it probably, I mean, animals wouldn't be trained to be domesticated if they weren't getting, in the first place, some evolutionary advantage from, say, wolves getting closer to humans at the campfire and getting food scraps and stuff like that. I think it's more of a feedback loop of positive reinforcement that's enacted by evolution over many generations and a lot of time and populations, rather than some quirk of human psychology that probably doesn't apply to animals that don't think in the same way, if they think at all, which is a whole nother thing. Jersey Pirates with the 50, who just says, for Grant. I love that. We also have Master of All with the Australian $5. Says, hey Kyle, what do you think of CDPR's advertising practices with the release of Cyberpunk? Have a safe holiday period. Hashtag Sim for Science. I think CDPR, the way that they advertised Cyberpunk was really deceptive. I thought, like, I know that 60% of the orders were for PC, okay? But almost half of their player base is going to be playing on consoles. Most of those people won't have next-gen consoles. And so to completely ignore the fact that the game's borderline unplayable and looks gross on, you know, what is going to be like 40% of your players, I think to not acknowledge that feels like true deception. And I'm not playing it until I get a PS5, because I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the game. If the game's good, I don't want to look at it when it looks like literally Vaseline is just smeared over my eyes. Elizabeth Calvert again with the 5 says, I'm not a demon. No, just a supervillain. Also lasers. Hey, how dare you? I'm not immortal. I'm not an immortal demon with lasers. I mean, look at me. If anything, I'm like Lucifer before. Never mind. The theoretical filmicist says, who knew the moon isn't made of cheese, it's made of Kyle. Oh, you mean this regolith? Lego my reg... I don't know what to do with that. Jesus not Water Walker says, for the Australian $5, simp for Steam. And that brings up a good point. For Grant's Steam Foundation, notice how it's not just STEM, because I recognize, and Grant recognized, that you also need the arts in there too. It's art and science and engineering and math. It's a reciprocal thing where great art inspires great science and vice versa. So you need the A in there for STEAM, in my opinion. Athanosis? Thananosis? Is that your name? That's cool. So I have a theory that Arya is really 15 feet tall, and that Kyle puts himself into a human mech for videos. Arya is 15 feet tall that Kyle puts into a human mech for videos. Arya is a computer. Is she a quantum computer? I'd have to ask her. She's jacked into like some thing in space that's got a lot of computing power. I don't know. I don't ask a whole lot of questions. I just, I come home. Hey, how was your day? Yeah. Mitch Blitz says, are you fine with the philanthropists wiping out 70% of the population before 2030? Because I sure am. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sounds like a conspiracy theory. And remember, there is no conspiracy theory that was discovered beforehand by people that ever turned out to be true. There have been conspiracies, no doubt. Watergate, assassination plots. But no popular conspiracy theory has ever come true. Think about it. Why would that be, Kyle? Well, it's almost like the system of belief it's based on is not, like, rooted in facts. Chance Haugland says, the moon is completely comprised of Kyle's previous corpses. Between the facility and Because Science, there are a lot of dead me's out there. It'd be fun to know exactly how many. Just a couple more questions. Joshua Meir says, simp for the Demon Core? Hey, sure, it's simping for me. It's doing work out there on YouTube. Whew. Love it. Master of All, with the Australian $5, says, I agree with the others in the chat that we want a Science of Rock Climbing episode. That would be awesome. That's Science of Rock Climbing and the Physics of Rock Climbing has been on my list as an episode for years. And now I'm much more free to do something like that. Only problem is lockdown. My local gym that I go to is still on lockdown. And I'm respecting that. So once rock climbing starts again, I want to do it. Also, I'm only 1 degree of separation away from Nolan North, and I would love to do a Uncharted themed rock climbing episode with Nolan North, because I think that would be sick. Lars with the 10, who says, hey Kyle, a super nerd here. Oh, old school, love it. Of course you can say that. Love the show. If you're comfortable sharing, how has your Catholic education affected your career as a science communicator? All right, and let's stop it here right before the top of the hour, because I think that's a fantastic question. So, yeah, I went to, 14 years of private Catholic education. I'm not a religious person. Maybe those two things are correlated. But I went through a lot of Catholic education, and I'm not going to lie, sometimes there was some friction between what I was learning or what I was supposed to be learning and what I thought I should be learning. I'll put it that way. But I will say, especially in college, I went to a private Jesuit college, and the Jesuits emphasize education above all else. So I had some really fantastic courses, religious courses specifically, that I learned a lot in, and it made me more worldly and made me more interested in world history, because as one of my professors put it, who was a German lecturer from Princeton, it was a history of religion class, and he said, well, the history of religion is important because the history of religion is more or less the history of the world. And it's true. Religion has shaped the world like nothing else in human history. And so to understand human history, that needs to be part of the conversation. And learning that history, learning, how thoughts and beliefs are shaped and morph over the years, it makes you a more rounded person. I feel like if you try to ignore something as monumental and monolithic as, religion, you're missing out on a lot of human history and a lot of reasons for things happening. So, I wouldn't shy away from learning more about history and religions specifically. They're not gonna get you, well, some of them will in some parts of the world, and that's tragic. But I think my religious education has made me a more understanding person, and at least a little bit more knowledgeable. And I think more knowledge is always better. Thank you so much, everyone who's joined me for this Office Hours Live. I know I was a little off my game today, but hey, I'm made of moon today. What did we talk about? We talked about how now all human-made crap now outweighs all biomass on the planet Earth, which should be some kind of marker for civilization. If some alien came by and be like, well, where are they on the scale of crap to living stuff? So it could be a very logical marker for the Anthropocene. We also talked about cryptography a little bit, and how a very specific phrase was allowed researchers and a supercomputer to crack maybe the most famous code of all time, or at least in our lifetimes. I didn't talk about sandcastles. I was gonna, but I didn't. Oh, fun fact. The ideal ratio of sand to water to build a perfect sandcastle based on physics and capillary action is 8 buckets of water to 1 bucket of sand. Or the other way around. It's the other way around. 8 buckets of sand to 1 bucket of water. Just so you know. That's why I didn't talk about it, because I messed it up already. We also talk about one of your comments from the facility, talking about mantis shrimp people, and how lasers could make quantum computers really crazy. Hey, thank you for joining me. If you want to continue on this conversation, if you want to join the facility, drape a nice silky white lab coat over your shoulders, get on our Discord, talk with me almost every day, even though I'm mostly lurking, and get episodes early, get behind the scenes photos. You can go to patreon.com/Kyle Hill, as my security team is putting in the chat. If you missed the live portion of this video, it will be up on the channel later today. This week, The Expanse is coming out. It's going to be fantastic. My favorite sci-fi show, my favorite TV show on right now, and we're going to be doing an Expanse-themed episode, so stay tuned for that. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your week, and then a great weekend, because everyone deserves things that are nice. And be nice to each other, because this is all we got. And also delete Facebook.